Say you go to a friend's house for a party, and it's got a mix of different groups. Some of your mutual friends are there, some are his work friends, some are their friends, and of course, there's Ted. The guy who drinks too much and ends up trying to flirt with everyone's wives. Don't be Ted. You meet a few people, have some discussions that are often about what everyone does for a living. Soon enough, you've made a new friend and made sure that Ted has a cab ride home, and then suddenly one of them sees you drinking a Bud Light, and they say something like, "Isn't that the gay beer?" You're taken aback. You were just grabbing whatever was in the cooler, and quickly someone runs over to try and appease the situation by saying something like, "Oh, why do you have to make everything so political? We're just trying to have a good time. Maybe leave the culture war at home." The culture war, the never-ending battle between the intersection of politics and everyday life. Corporations branding themselves and civil rights movements and iconography to sell you on the concept that a company is more than just a tasty beverage, and it is itself a political movement. The term's origins came from the 1870s German word Kulturkampf, or culture struggle, but the modern use of the term in America came from the 1920s, when urban and rural American values came into conflict. At the time, decades of immigration to the States by people of certain European descent led to the idea that other kinds were, quote, aliens looking to perverse society. Nowadays, with the internet, you can't escape the culture war.
Because if it could happen to Dr. Seuss, it might happen to you. Dr. Seuss went from being a beloved childhood author to worse than Hitler in just a matter of days.
It's a constant battle between progressive concepts like ending class struggle, the liberation and emancipation of Black Americans, not to mention reparations, the persecution of LGBTQ+ people, furthering workers' rights and solidifying bodily autonomy for women, or the orthodox return to more previous conservative values. What's important to understand, however, is that one person's civil rights is another person's culture war. You might take it for granted now that you see pride flags everywhere, as if corporations make it a priority to not only celebrate diversity, but are willing to brand themselves with the symbolism of the civil rights movement. When a Black trans woman fought back in 1969 in the Stonewall riots, it was still illegal to be homosexual in America. Thousands of people were imprisoned, beaten, lynched, and killed simply for being gay. In the 1970s, the American Psychiatric Association finally removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders, but that wasn't until 1973. In the 1990s, the policy of don't ask, don't tell allowed queer people to serve in the military, but only if they kept their sexual identity a secret and lie about who they were. A Supreme Court decision in 2015 legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. The repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act in 2013 also further solidified marriage equality. All of the blood and suffering and mass casualties from how the AIDS crisis was initially handled isn't printed in bold text on a pride shirt when you buy it at Target, but it's woven into the fabric of what that symbol represents. Lego and Barbie and Skittles and every other corporate product that is now proudly in support of civil rights movements like the Black Lives Matter movement are now only doing it because there's now a safe environment for them to do so. They view the calculated risk that's being directly associated with a political movement will overall benefit them, so they're using it to profit from. It's a bizarre double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it's certainly a good thing for there to be more acceptance towards trans kids or asexual adults. But these companies aren't actively trying to further civil rights, only profit from them. Then they become the next target of the culture wars.
Bet you didn't think M&Ms were pushing intolerance, but they were. They've been changed. You're seeing the changes right now on your screen.
Politicians and media pundits will target representation as indoctrination. They'll pretend they're part of a larger conspiracy of some kind of, quote, woke mind virus, trying to get the people to embrace diversity, when what they're really just trying to do is get that bag. And why do politicians and the media focus on the desexualization of candy? Because it provides something known as false consciousness. Simply put, it's a distraction. Texas, for example, has a larger percentage of its population living in poverty than the overall U.S. average. In 2007, Texas ranked 9th in its poverty rate for the elderly, ranked 49th in its percentage of its adult population with no high school diploma, and ranked number 1 in its percentage of the populace with no health insurance. But rather than address any of that, Texas Senator Ted Cruz is spending time out of his day to coordinate a bizarre homoerotic beer commercial press op to try and convince Americans that the big bad president is coming to take away your beer.
Now these idiots have come out and said, drink 2 beers a week. That's their guideline. Well, I got to tell you, if they want us to drink 2 beers a week, frankly, they can kiss my ass.
When all that happened was that there was a recommendation that was made that you shouldn't drink more than 2 beers a day. Something a lot of people know by a different term, common sense. Distracting you with Mr. Potato Head not being gendered, Dr. Seuss no longer selling his racist books, or Queen being cancelled because a children's album doesn't have fat-bottom girls on the playlist is far better than admitting what a completely and objective failure you've been at providing anything for your constituents. Things like healthcare and childcare aren't sexy like drinking a cold one and giving the middle finger to Joe Brandon. That's why we pretend like the culture war is an actual war. Not the war on child poverty or starvation, but an even more important one. One for the soul of you, the soul of America. And you don't want to lose your soul, do you? Thanks so much for watching. We live in scary times right now where it seems like politicians are really bent on rechanging the school curriculum to teach alternate versions of history that will benefit things like white supremacy. We want to start creating a series where we talk about difficult subjects, but in a simple and easy to digest manner like the one you just saw before you. If you'd like to help us so that we can continue to produce content like this, please consider financially supporting us, as it's the only way for us to make more of these videos on a regular basis. Go to patreon.com/theserfs, and any amount that you can donate helps create this content and more of this kind of stuff going forward. Also, subscribing, liking, sharing, and hitting that bell icon are crucial for us to try and get this message out there. Thank you so much for helping.